In today's episode of the Locked On Pistons podcast, we have a crossover episode coming to you guys where we team up with Gavin Shaw of Locked On Knicks to preview the Pistons' third matchup against the New York Knicks. Will the Knicks come out with this one where the Pistons sweep the Knicks on the season? We'll talk about today's episode, Locked On Pistons podcast.
You are Locked On Pistons, your daily Detroit Pistons podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's the deal? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On Pistons podcast. Per usual, I am your host, Khahil. You can find me over on Twitter at Khahil. I've been covering the Detroit Pistons for the last 4 years for the Locked On Network. Been a credential media member over the last 3 years, and I appreciate all of you guys who have made Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. Appreciate all of you guys' support out there. And today's episode is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Have your cake and drink it too. Birthday cake flavor is back. No fork needed. Vanilla cakey flavor, caffeinated kick, and no sugar. It's party time. Order now at 5hourenergy.com or Amazon. Make sure you guys hit that subscribe button or leave us a 5-star review, whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. Another great way to support the podcast. But enough of the introductions. I'm going to throw it to the crossover episode that I recorded with Locked On Knicks host Gavin Shaw, where we preview the matchup, talk about some X's and O's, some scheme adjustments for both teams, and where they stand going into the playoffs and who has the edge right now. We'll talk about all of it in the episode. I hope you guys enjoy it. I'll catch you guys in the next one.
All right, guys, as promised, I am lucky enough to be joined by Khahil, the fantastic host of the Locked On Pistons podcast. For our Locked On Pistons audience listening, I am Gavin Shaw. I have a feeling, maybe from the playoffs last year, maybe from more recently, a lot of your fans are familiar because we've gotten the meanest YouTube comments of our life after the 2 games against the Pistons. And last time I was on vacation, and my co-host actually was like, I didn't really, I wasn't on my phone. I didn't have internet. And I was like, oh dude, I see the Pistons episode is doing great. And he's like, yeah, man, just don't look at the comments. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, yeah, it's going to kind of ruin your mood when you come back. And it did. But you know what? I appreciate the clicks. I appreciate the listens. So thank you, Pistons fans. Thank you, Koo, for doing this crossover.
No, trust me. You take the views and you listen. People are passionate, man. That's all. People are passionate. You got to roll with it.
I appreciate it because there's a real rivalry developing between these two teams. Like in the in the 80s and 90s, like the lengths or the stretches where they were really good didn't overlap. Obviously, the Pistons early 2000s were incredible. The Knicks were abysmal, like garbage fire and embarrassment. So it is cool to have 2 cities this big, 2 fan bases this big and passionate, good at the same time. The place I wanted to start is just kind of like a big picture overview of things. Was there anything you saw in the first 2 matchups that one just changed your opinion specifically about how a Knicks Pistons series would go, and anything in those first 2 matchups or a first half of the season where we should note for the Knicks fans listening, Detroit has the single best record in the NBA right now. They just passed Oklahoma City on win percentage. Like anything that changed your opinion to the point where you're like, yeah, I think Detroit is just the definitive favorite in the Eastern Conference. Like no qualifiers needed.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of evidence that's telling me, and I want to feel like the Pistons are just, the topic right here says, are the Pistons inevitable? I want to say yes, because we're now going since November. Everyone looks at, I believe right now they're still second in defense, but since November, they have been the best defense in basketball. And I believe the distance between them and second place is the same distance between second place and the 9th place team. So they've been head and shoulders above everybody else in defense since the end of November. So I don't think I think after the year, people will more of the NBA community will talk about how this team wasn't just good defensively or a really good defensive team this year. This was a crazy defensive team we're watching this year. They were doing some crazy stuff on the defensive end of the floor. I think one of my main takeaways that I took from the matchup so far against the Knicks, and I know the second game the Knicks were missing some players, and something I'm actually going to bring up to you in the second segment I wanted to ask you about. But from my point of view, and from a lot of Pistons fans' point of view, I still think that if you were to just say, go to 2K and put the highest overalls, line them up, the Knicks probably have more higher overall players, like more 80 pluses than the Pistons, I guess, or more 85 pluses than the Pistons do. But it appears to me from these matchups is that New York really does not want to play as physical as the Pistons do. And they really don't want to get into that type of battle. And I don't think many teams want to get into that battle with the Pistons, but it feels like it's just stylistically something the Knicks, that's not something the Knicks really want to buy into. They want to play, I don't want to say finesse, but they definitely don't want to get into a low scoring, we're trying to fight, and that's not really what they're trying to do, it appears to me. And it felt like by halftime of these last two games, the Pistons had kind of just worn them down, and it just got out of hand after that. So I think the Knicks, I think the Knicks and the Cavs are the two best teams in the East outside the Pistons as of right now. I love what Boston's doing, but I'm not as confident that it will work in the playoffs. We'll see. But I think those two teams are the best two teams outside Detroit. And I try to be as objective as possible, but I feel like that so far from what we've seen, I don't think there's much. We'll see how this third matchup goes, but I don't really think that the Pistons should be heavily concerned right now with how the Knicks are suited. I think it's a matchup problem as of right now. And maybe things change in the playoffs because Brunson's he's proven to be a playoff demon. Yeah. So that definitely is what can change, and it changed things last year for sure. And we're talking about regular season games, but so far it just feels like it's a mismatch that the Knicks don't really like to play this style.
Yeah, I have a ton of thoughts on that. I'm going to save them for the third segment when we get into the matchup specific stuff. The only thing I'll say is like you're absolutely right. The first two games, like if the Knicks bring that level of, and by level I mean lack of intensity to the series, like it's going to be a sweep, or it's going to be 5 games and the Knicks win one where Brunson goes crazy or Cat goes crazy. But the Knicks cannot compete with the Pistons if they have that level of competitiveness, right? Like there's just no world Detroit's going to embarrass them. They're going to shame them. They're going to throw them out the club for all intents and purposes. Like it is not going to go well for New York if they don't have another gear. I think the Knicks do have another gear based on what we've seen in terms of how they've responded since losing 9 of 11 after that, winning 9 of their last 11 games. And just in playoff series past, obviously we saw it to some extent in the Pistons series last year, though I don't think that was a very good series for the Knicks. We've seen it when they beat the Celtics. We saw it a few years ago against the Cavs, against the Sixers. Like the Knicks do usually have another gear, but they have to prove it with this group. And Detroit has proven it every single game and has shown off a level of consistency this year that the Knicks, frankly, in the whole Brunson era, have not really touched over the course of like a 60-game stretch the way Detroit has this year. What is your biggest concern about the Pistons right now? Like I know preseason we talked a lot about like to what extent they address their shooting woes and losing Malik Beasley, who was like arguably like not really that big of an argument, like a top 3 shooter in basketball last year. Duncan Robinson has obviously proven to be a fantastic fit, a very capable replacement. Like, and to your point, if Detroit leans into this style, leans into having an all-time great defense, maybe they don't need to shoot the ball any better than they have so far. That is the part that I'm curious about, like if it translates a little different in the playoffs than it does in the regular season. But I'm not the expert you are. What is your kind of biggest lingering concern about this team?
I have 2 big concerns with the team, and I think every team in the East is flawed. I think one of the things about this NBA season is it feels like that I feel like a lot of people expect like the team that comes out the West to win the finals as of right now. Like I think that's probably like the public opinion right now.
Yeah.
But I feel like every team in the NBA right now is flawed, and it seems like it's just wide open. And the Pistons, their 2 biggest concerns for me when the playoffs roll around is first off, it's their half-court offense. It's something that's been a concern of theirs since last year. It was a concern of theirs in the playoffs last year. That's where the Knicks ended up beating the Pistons out. I mean, they just executed much better in the half-court offense, especially late in games. Brunson just took over. I mean, that's what's going to win and lose you games. And the Pistons, while they're a better half-court offense than they were last year, and a lot of that is thanks to Jalen Duren taking this step as a scorer and a creator himself, they still are not like a top 15 offense in the half court. I think they're around 18th right now. Last year, they were lower than that. So they've gotten a little bit better, but they're still not a great half court offense. And obviously the game does start to slow down in the playoffs. So that is something that you have to watch for and see, can the Pistons score enough points within the half court to win not just games, but series? Can they go deep in the playoffs with having a not above average half court offense so far? So I think that's by far the biggest concern that I think everyone would have for the Detroit Pistons. The second one, and it's something I've talked about on the podcast the last few days when looking at stuff after the All-Star break. They have to, I think, spend the rest of the time after this All-Star break, the rest of the season, trying to test different things to come up with multiple different answers for what do we do when teams put a big man on Asar Thompson? Because the answer to that question cannot be we sit Asar Thompson. That cannot be the answer again. Last year, I will go down to my grave thinking forever that if JB does not take Asar out in the game 6 with 2.5 minutes left, 3 minutes when the Pistons were up 2 possessions, I believe it was 6-7 points, if he doesn't take him out at that point, and then Brunson goes on to score back-to-back times on Dennis Schroeder, I think the Pistons force Game 7. Maybe they lose Game 7, but I think they at least force Game 7. And they dominated his minutes last year in the playoffs. They've been great in his minutes since he became an NBA player, really. The answer in the playoffs coming up cannot be arguably the best defender in basketball. That can't be what your answer is. So I really think the Pistons, their biggest concern is half-court offense. The second one is we have to try a bunch of different stuff to wrap this season up. We have the first seed. We have a decent enough of a lead to where we can try to get answers for the playoffs, data points. They need to try a bunch of things to figure out, hey, if teams want to play us like this with Asar, what can we do? Can we use him as a screener more? Can we use him in the DHO a little bit more? Can we put the ball in his hands in certain situations? Like, what do we want to do so when the playoffs roll around, JB's answer isn't Karis LeVert come in and Asar sit down and you lose games because of it.
Yeah, it's so funny because that was the single biggest question about the Knicks in the playoffs last year. What happens when teams put a big on Josh Hart? And the funny part is that the Knicks didn't really totally solve that, and they were able to win anyways, like partially by just kind of playing Josh through it. And I think this year, especially against a team like Detroit, that I think if the Knicks have I don't want to say a non-shooter because he's 40% from three this year, but a guy who at times is an unwilling shooter and a guy. I think the most important thing with all this stuff is that a team is just willing to live with them shooting. And unless Josh is willing to shoot 12 threes, like that is ultimately going to work out in Detroit's favor or Boston's favor, whoever New York is playing. So that is a really fascinating parallel between the two teams. And that's something we didn't see a ton from the Knicks, from my memory, in the regular season that I do think in the playoffs would potentially be a difference. But when we come back, you are going to grill me on the New York Knicks. I'm interested to hear your questions because sometimes I learn stuff about this team. When you ask me stuff, you always have really good questions on the Knicks. We're going to do that next and get into some matchup keys right here on Locked on Knicks and Locked on Pistons. But first, we got to tell you about some new old friends here on the Locked on Knicks podcast, and that is our friends over at 5 Hour Energy. Welcome to the 5 Hour Energy Flavor Draft. We are looking at every aspect of the draft to let you know which tasty flavors are the best and which just might be sleepers. The board is set. The flavors are ready. Welcome to the 5 Hour Energy Flavor Draft. We're looking at every aspect of the draft to let you know which tasty flavors are the best and which might just be the ultimate sleeper. The board is set. The flavors are ready. And only one is going to take this top spot. 5 Hour Energy has a wide variety of flavors. They have something for everyone, and the shots give you a boost with zero sugar. But my top choice for the draft has to be cherry. I love everything cherry, and 5 Hour Energy nails it because they have a bold cherry candy style flavor, sweet, but what keeps you going is that light tart edge, classic red fruit profile, bright and punchy taste, smooth and easy to recognize. But if I was going for a sleeper, a dark horse, I would have to circle to the strawberry banana. That is a classic tropical combination with strawberry, a taste that goes in everything from smoothies and milkshakes to cake and ice cream. Sweet strawberry flavor up front, soft, mellow banana finish, smooth, creamy, fruity profile. It is awesome. So find your new favorite flavor of 5 Hour Energy shots, available online at 5hourenergy.com or on Amazon. All right, what's up, guys? We're back. Locked on Knicks, Locked on Pistons. Cool. Passing the mic to you, buddy. What do you want to know about the New York Knicks?
All right, first question I have. So from an outsider's point of view, it felt like the Knicks went out and they got Jeremy Sochan, and they also went out and got Jose Alvarado. In the first segment, I was talking about how it felt like through the first two games that this was a mismatch or a matchup problem with the Knicks because the Knicks don't want to play this physical, snippy, that kind of style of basketball. And it felt like to me, some of those concerns that or thoughts I had from the outsider's perspective was kind of confirmed by the fact they went out and got Jose Alvarado, who is a dog defender. They go out and get Jeremy Sochan as well. Is that something that Knicks fans and that you yourself have felt like throughout the start of this season going into the All-Star break, that this was something that my analysis is correct, that that's something that the Knicks didn't have before and it was a problem they had to go address with Jose Alvarado and Jeremy Sochan?
Yeah, it's a tricky one because I would say yes, it's absolutely a correct observation, but we've seen similar stuff. We saw similar stuff last year. Like basically, there were no questions about this, right? When they had Dante DiVincenzo, when they had Isaiah Hartenstein, you combine that with what Brunson brings, what Hart brings, Julius Randle, frankly, just in terms, like he had some of the same mental mistakes as Cat, but from a toughness perspective, like there was a real, for lack of a better term, like dog factor on the Knicks team 2 years ago. And last year, it took a full regular season to kind of find that. But I mean, Pistons fans saw it in that series last year. Like I don't think tactically Tom Thibodeau coached a particularly good series. Like he loved that the Pistons wanted to play in the muck, and he said, "All right, let's go down there with them." And that almost got the Knicks killed. Like we know, like one call different, to your point, maybe a little bit more faith in Asar Thompson. Like Detroit pulls a major upset, and instead of like all the conversation this offseason being like, "Wow, the Knicks fired Tom Thibodeau after conference finals," it would be like, "Of course they fired Tom Thibodeau. They lost in the first round." Like I don't think that was the right way to approach that series. So my answer is twofold in the sense that like I do think the Knicks have another level. And I think like, and this is something you can look at and say, well, this is a sign that it's just not going to happen for them. Like, because they didn't bring that at all in the first two games against Detroit. Or you could look at past history and say, as much as coaches want to say like, hey, you can't turn the intensity on and off, the Knicks do have a track record of being able to turn that on and off. And I do think this is a team that has been through the battles, has been through the wars. I don't like that they don't take that approach to every regular season game. I do think it's something that could potentially come back to bite them. I think the fact that the Pistons practice that they live that. I know Fred Katz had like a great story. I'm sure you've talked about it too, about how this Detroit team competes at everything. Like that is a real mental advantage. And I think it will be a challenge for the Knicks to make that gap up. I don't have a lot of questions about at least Jalen Brunson, Josh Hart, OG Anunoby, like being able to compete at that level. Like those guys all in their own ways are killers. You said it about Brunson, him in particular. I have no doubt there. To your point, though, I do think it helps to add Alvarado, right? We saw the Knicks turn things around, not so much against the Pistons, but in general for that 9 wins and 11 game stretch, like once Landry Shamet came back. And they're currently without Deuce McBride. But when you have those two plus Alvarado, like I think one of the most underrated aspects in a basketball player is just how much energy can you bring to your team. Like that is part of the magic of Steph Curry, like his ability to just ignite a crowd. And like Jose being a New York City native, being undersized, being scrappy, like the backcourt steals, like he can tilt games, certainly at MSG, but I think also on the road, just with his willingness to compete, his willingness to stand up for his teammates, which we see Detroit has more of that than maybe any other team in the league. And the Knicks maybe are not matching that, but Alvarado will stand up and fight. Deuce McBride will stand up and fight. Landry Shamet will stand up and fight. Jalen Brunson might struggle at times against Asar Thompson. He's not going to be intimidated in that matchup. So to your point, I do think that was a necessary factor. I think the other thing Jose brings that will be significant, I don't know if you want to go deeper on this or maybe we save it for segment 3, is just an ability to handle the Pistons ball pressure, because Tyler Kolek was like punched in the mouth and didn't really recover in that first game. And the Knicks needed just a slightly more experienced hand at the backup point guard spot. And I do think having just a little bit more confident ball handling is just a necessity to survive Detroit and like with the guys they bring off the bench and the type of ball pressure they can apply.
Yeah, and that was actually going to be my second question I was going to ask you about was with that, obviously in the first two matchups, I think this year from a Pistons perspective, I feel like that Asar Thompson is even better defender than he was last year. I think he's reaching crazy levels right now. I think Cade is much better than he was I think this team is just overall, even though the box score may not say Cade is much better than he was last year, I think he's way better than he was last year. With that said, I've seen a lot of complaining from Knicks fans about too much is on Brunson, too much is on Brunson, too much is on Brunson. Iman Shumpert was talking about it, I believe, on First Take. He felt like that Brunson has more on his plate than Cade does. I'm not trying to start that argument, try to get an answer on that. What I am asking about is what you just mentioned. It felt like to me, watching the first two games, that Brunson, he didn't check out, but it was, man, can someone else like help me out here? Like I'm facing Asar Thompson for 94 feet through the entire first half. And by the time the halftime's over and we're getting to the third quarter, he's so beat up and so drained from having to deal with pressure the entire first half that the game ends up getting out of hand. The Pistons end up going up by 20 plus, and then it's over at that point. And a lot of that I felt like had to do with the Pistons were constantly hitting Brunson nonstop over and over and giving him pressure anytime he had ball in his hands. And it was all on him to create everything. My question is, do you think that's a problem? And two, do you think the Knicks have answers to that, to where they can put him off the ball maybe a little bit? Is there someone else they can trust to run the action, maybe have Brunson come off some pin downs or something to try to get some of that pressure off of Brunson to where he's not having to deal with the SAR for 8 minutes. And when he comes out, now he's dealing with Ron Holland for another 10 minutes. Like is there something that you feel like the Knicks can do to kind of alleviate some of that pressure? Or do you think it's something, hey, it's just the matchup, you're going to have to win it this way?
Yeah, I think it's tricky because like, especially to your point, like Brunson can get baited in those games where nothing, like it is a little like chicken or the egg. Like, is it that Jalen is overdoing it and getting aggro and trying to force it and trying to be the hero? Or is it that no one else in the Knicks wants any part of the basketball? Like, you go back to the box score of that first game, the most incredible stat of that game to me, and the most damning stat from a Knicks perspective, is OG Anunoby and Karl-Anthony Towns combining for 7 field goals. That's not 7 field goals each. That is 7 total field goal attempts between the two of them. I think a lot of that was Mike Brown starting double big. And to me, like that is the only way the Knicks are going to beat the Pistons is if they lean into 5-out looks. And that's not to say like that there isn't a time and a space for the Knicks to play Josh Hart and Mitchell Robinson together and try to match Detroit's energy and try to bludgeon the Pistons a little bit. I think Detroit is probably built honestly better than any other team in the NBA outside of maybe a fully healthy Rocket side to handle that kind of like assault. Like Mitch, who is putting up, I believe, the most offensive rebounds per 36 minutes in NBA history. He's averaging like close to 9 per 36 minutes, which is crazy. In 45 total minutes against the Pistons, he's only had 3 offensive rebounds. So Detroit's done a great job on him so far. But that is off topic. Like, to your point, I think the Knicks, if they try to play the Pistons game and start double big or start Josh Hart, I just don't think they can win the series. Like, there's just not enough room for anyone other than Brunson to create one-on-one. Cat was stripped 3 different times in that first game, and it's because the Knicks were not playing 5-out. Detroit always had someone they could help off of. Isaiah Stewart is already about as well-equipped as anyone in the NBA to defend Cat, while to your point, Assar is about as well-equipped as anyone in the NBA to defend Brunson. And if you're then able to send a second body at Cat's drives, and we know Cat, he's better at this year, but he still struggles to pass out of doubles and to like recognize help coming and saying, great, like I'm going to like flip this to the corner. Like, he's good relative to a center, but he's not Luka Doncic doing that. Like, he's going to get stripped, and he got stripped a ton in that first game. I think if the Knicks play 5-out, and particularly like Landry Shamet physically could struggle a little bit with Detroit, and I think they'll try to get Cade switched onto him. I'm curious to see if the Knicks would be willing to start Deuce. This has been a long time crusade on my show. The Knicks numbers, like Brunson, Cat, Deuce together, is like plus 12 over 2 years running. Deuce, along with Cat, is still far and away the Knicks on-off leader. If Pistons fans don't know, he is likely out the rest of, if not the majority of the regular season after getting sports hernia surgery. Fortunately for the Knicks, if they see Detroit, unless one or both teams really fall off, it'll be in the conference finals. So I do think there's a chance you get closer to 100% version of him. But just adding another like A+ shooter out there, I think will open it up enough room, one, for Brunson to, like, with the screen or going one-on-one, like, create advantages and let other guys play out of advantages. 2, to your point, let other guys handle the ball, use Brunson off ball, which is something Mike Brown has done a ton. The Knicks can play with a little bit more pace. Like, Deuce is so good about injecting that into the Knicks offense. Like, but I think if the Knicks take the bait and try to play the Pistons game, it's not really going to go well for New York.
I have another question. It's about Cat. Do you want me to save it for the third segment? You want to get it out now?
Yeah, let's save it for the third. We'll be back in a sec. We'll talk Cat. We'll talk some keys when we return right here on Locked On Knicks and Locked On Pistons.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. Workplace chaos, deadline stacking up, inbox overflowing, and the one position you have yet to fill is still sitting open. When the pressure's on, you need the right hire. This is a job for sponsored jobs. Indeed Sponsored Jobs helps you reach the people who actually fit what you're looking for, skills, experience, and location, so you're not just hoping the right candidate stumbles across your post. And here's a stat that says it all. In the minute I've been talking to you, companies like yours made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with Indeed Sponsored Jobs. Spend less time searching and more time actually interviewing candidates who check all your boxes. Less time, less stress, more results. When you need the right person to cut through the chaos, this is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. And listeners of this show will get $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Just go to Indeed.com/podcast right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire. This is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs.
We also want to tell you about our good friends over at Quo. New year, new systems. This is the time when a lot of us look at the messier parts of how we run our businesses and think there has to be a better way. And there is. Streamlining your communications is one of the quickest upgrades you can make. That's why today's episode is brought to you by Quo, spelled Quo, the smarter way to run your business communications. Because when your team is reachable, organized, and communicating in one place, you're not just working cleaner, you're creating more opportunities to connect with customers. I love how simple Quo makes everything. Your whole team can call and text from one shared business number, so nothing gets missed. Everyone sees the full conversation thread, which makes replies faster and more personal. It works right from your phone or computer, and you can keep your existing number. And Quo's smart AI tools automatically log calls, summarize conversations, and highlight next steps so details never slip through the cracks. It's no surprise Quo is the #1 rated business phone system on G2, trusted by more than 90,000 businesses, from solo operators to growing teams. Make this the year where no opportunity, no customer slips away. Try Quo for free, plus get 20% off your first 6 months when you go to quo.com/LockedOnNBA. That's QUO.com/LockedOnNBA. Quo, no missed calls, no missed customers. All right, Ku, what do you want to know about Cat? And then let's get into some matchup keys for round 3 between these two teams.
So my question about Cat is there's a lot of noise from people outside of New York. They were seeing all these reports, all these rumors about people are upset with Cat, people are not happy with Cat, all this stuff. My question is, it feels like Cat has kind of taken a step back this year from an outsider's perspective. I feel like in order for the Knicks, forget just beating the Pistons, we can save those thoughts for later, but just for the Knicks to get to where they want to go, they need Cat to be better than what he's been. And is there any belief that you have that Cat can actually reach that point, that he actually can be that? Or is this level of like doubt or this level of inevitability that like Cat's going to let us down? Like, this is not, we can only get so far, and this is probably not going to go. Probably not going to go as far as we'd like to go with this core right here. I've seen a lot of Knicks fans, trust me, I've seen the same comments you've been seeing. So I've seen a lot of complaining about Cat, and a lot of people saying, well, we got Cat, so as long as he's still on the team, there's only so far we're going to go here. It seems like fans are really getting sick of him. So just where are you at with Cat? Because in the first matchup, even in the playoffs last year, like Cat, to me, going into the series was Cat's going to be the mismatch here. Like, he's going to be the person that swings this series, because the Pistons struggled last year to guard stretch bigs. And Tobias, he actually allowed Tobias to play really good defense on him. He took advantage of JD at times in the playoffs, but Tobias actually did an incredible job guarding him. And then the first matchup this year, I feel like he didn't make his presence felt really at all, and the Pistons kind of took advantage of him. So where are you at with Cat, and is he like a liability, do you think, at this point? Like, where are you at with him?
Yeah, so I mean, I'll say this to start off. I mentioned it before, but Cat has like a +8 net rating on the year. Like, we have 2 years running of the Knicks just being a way better team when he's on the floor. And people can contest that stat. People could be like, analytics. But to me, like, that's not analytics. It's just saying like, hey, we have a large sample size that when he plays, the Knicks are a better basketball team. And to some extent, it's as simple as that. I think the counter argument for people will be like, all right, is he padding that against the worst teams in the league? Like, does that translate against the Pistons of the world? And my answer is like, hell yeah. Like, but Mike Brown has to lean into what makes Cat special, and that is playing 5 out with him. And if you don't play 5 out, and to your point, like, you let a team put a wing on him and take him out of the game that way, like, why even have him on the floor? Like, that is my biggest fear. We saw it so often in the playoffs last year, where he just had these stretches where he was invisible. On top of that, like, a big part of the noise piling up this year is that he's shooting like 35% from 3. And we're talking about someone who, like, XJ always references these numbers on our pod, but like, historically, like, is not just one of the best shooting bigs in the league. Like, you look at his shooting percentage on open threes, like, he's just one of the best pure shooters in the NBA. You would, unless there's some injury we don't know about, I would expect like a big bounce back the second half of the year. He shot really well over All-Star weekend. Who knows if that means anything? His finishing has also been just terrible. I will say, like, athletically, Detroit game, certainly not, but against the Nuggets and then against the Sixers, like, he looked better than he has all year, like attacking closeouts and driving. I just think that the single biggest thing is that Mike Brown sets him up for success by playing in space, and the Knicks do, like, this is kind of an esoteric, like, answer, but like some healing, because there were, from what I heard, like, very real locker room issues, like, and not about Cat specifically, but he was certainly like involved with them, and people are at times are like frustrated with his approach. And like, and on Cat's end, like, you had Draymond Green clowning him, like, after Draymond, like, I don't have to like go all the way down this road, but basically said like made fun of Cat for like mourning his dead friend. And then like no one on the team stood up for him 2 years in a row. Like, there's some weird stuff there. And Alvarado, I think, will honestly help this locker room a lot. And he seems like another guy who's only goal when he's on the floor is to get Cat going. But it's on Jalen Brunson to some degree to like really embrace that, to feed Cat. And it's what we always talk about. Cat like has to get off like the offensive fouls, the constant hooking against Detroit, like a team that plays so physical that like will not give him those easy blow bys. Like it is going to be really easy for him to get frustrated and do stupid stuff. So he has to keep his head. He has to be locked in defensively. It's a lot of ifs, but I still think the ceiling is there for Cat in a big way. And honestly, the floor is there with Cat in a big way, because even with all those frustrations and you watch him and you're pulling your hair out and then you look and like the Knicks are just inevitably better when he's on the floor. I wanted to wrap up. I know we're running a little low on time, so I'll just throw out one of these. Like, but let me know if you have anything specific you want to throw out. We talked ball pressure a little bit. I was curious your take on like Cade's approach this year and how he's going to handle like a playoff series. And not that the Knicks got in his head last year, but I do think they did a good job on him. And like his turnovers, like something that was an issue all last season, hasn't been as much this year. We're sky high. Like I think OG like defended him about as well as you're going to defend him. I think Khahil, as much crap as he took, like honestly did a pretty solid job in those matchups. And the Knicks were able to like keep him from being super efficient. He had some monster games where he destroyed the Knicks, but relative to the regular season last year, they held their own. I have a feeling I can guess your answer, but do you think he's like significantly more equipped to potentially be the best guy in the series against the Knicks this time around?
Yeah, I think he definitely is. I think last year, everything you said is completely true. I've said this before on my podcast. I'm going to say it again. Some people took it as like a diss to Cade. It actually was a very big compliment to him. I felt like if the Pistons got this version of Cade this year, last year, they'd probably win the series. That's what I felt like. He's been incredible this year. Again, I know the box score numbers don't say that he's made this crazy jump, but like you mentioned, the turnovers are a big deal because the Pistons, I know these are some buzzwords that you're hearing in the NBA a lot this year, but the Pistons really do play the possession game. They're not going to win by shooting 15 plus 3, making 15 plus 3s. They're not going to score 130 points. They're not going to be this half-court juggernaut. What they're going to do is they're going to get a ton of offensive rebounds, give themselves extra possessions. They're going to turn you over, take away your possessions, and they're not going to turn the ball over by giving you possession. So they're playing the possession game, and in order to do that, which they've done all year, Cade had to get better with turning the ball over. He could not continue to turn the ball over as much as he did. And if you look at some of the numbers, last year, his scoring turnover percentage, 8.4%. This year, it's 6.1%. So that's way down. You look at his turnover percentage in transition, that's way down. I don't have the number right in front of me just yet. But basically the turnovers in each situation that really hurt the Pistons at times last year, obviously Cade was the reason they were there. Nowhere near am I trying to say that Cade let the Pistons down at all. That's not what I'm suggesting. My point is that he's gotten better in these incremental areas on the margins that really, I think, will change how teams or how effective the Pistons will be in the playoffs. So the last number I wanted to throw out here was in transition last year. He had a turnover percentage of 17.4%. If you go to this year, that's all the way down to 13%. If you look at his turnover percentage in pick and roll situation, I believe it was around 19%. This year it's at 15%. So he's and scoring situations in isolation, it was around 10%. Now it's around 7%. So he's cutting all of this down. And I think that was the biggest thing the Knicks did was turn him over a ton. They threw a lot of pressure at him. He didn't handle it well at times. So I thought that was probably the biggest thing the Knicks did well last year. And he knew that. He went into the offseason really looked at film and tried to improve at this. I think he has. So I think so far and now playoffs are different. Everything ratchets up. We'll see how it goes. But so far from the data we've gotten from the regular season, it tells me that he's much more equipped to handle that type of pressure. And I don't expect him to fall apart turnover-wise at times in these playoffs like he did last year against the Knicks. I believe one game actually had like 8 turnovers against you guys. It was rough.
It might have been game 6 or 7. I know, and the 3-point shooting will obviously be the other thing for him. And that was something like I think as the series went on, and something you and I talked about this offseason, just like adjusting to like what is the cardio baseline you need to have like whatever like a 32%, 34% usage rate in the playoffs against like a good locked in defense. And I assume that is something like he spent all offseason probably working on and preparing for. So I think that'll be harder. I think Jalen Duren, like as much as he cooked the Knicks on the short roll at times last year, if you blitz Cade this year, like that element is going to be even more tricky. I do think the Knicks will have a better defense this time around, even though they played pretty well against the Pistons last year, just because it's unless like I'll knock on every piece of wood in my house, unless it's like a less healthy version, unless Mitchell Robinson gets hurt, like he is athletically like starting to resemble what Knicks fans saw at the beginning of the 23-24 season, where I was talking about him as like a potential defensive player of the year candidate. He was so far off that even early this year, and he has like started to hit that again. I do think that gives the Knicks a higher defensive ceiling. The Knicks last 15 games, I think they've been like the second best defense in basketball, third best
I was
defense
just looking at
in
it.
basketball. Yeah, so like that is really, and the competition level hasn't been great. So we'll see how that holds up, but it is really encouraging that like the Knicks can mix in the 5 out and mix in high level defense and offensive rebounding. Last thing I'll say, unless you have any final thoughts,
I do have one thing I wanted to ask you just real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
You don't have to spend too much time with it, but what do you feel like the Knicks' best defensive coverage against Cade will be? Because at the beginning of this year, a lot of teams were trapping him and blitzing him a ton. But to start the year, the Pistons were absolutely killing it to a point where teams just flat out stopped. They saw the scouting report, like, okay, that's not working. Instead, we're going to just have Cade shoot a bunch of middies. We're going to have him try to dissect us that way. And if it does, then it is what it is. And the half-court offense to start the year was amazing because they were constantly playing 4-on-3 situations. Then teams moved away from it, started to struggle a little bit, and then picked up over the last month. All of a sudden, you're starting to see teams trap and blitz Cade a little bit more, and at times, it's starting to throw them off. It feels like that they went such a long time without seeing it that now it's like, oh, God, okay, we kind of forgot what to do here, or just slow to react. So it seems like there's been times where if teams throw like crazy or different coverages at them at random times, it has caused them to be late to react at times. I was interested to hear what do you think is the Knicks' best defensive coverage versus Cade? Do you think they're just going to switch, be at the level, drop? Do you think they're going to trap him a ton? Like, what do you think is the best case?
Yeah, I think there's not one answer, like you'd say with any superstar player. I liked when they blitzed last year. I thought that helped, and that is honestly the type of defense that Cat gets most engaged into, and he can hold up. I think they will have to switch pretty heavily. The one time you want to do that a little less is when Brunson is involved, obviously, because Cade can like bully him a little bit and shoot over him. The thing the Knicks have going for them is that like they will provide really aggressive help. And it's going to be a fascinating counterpoint, I think, to the Celtics series last year, where Boston had dramatically better shooting around their stars than what the Pistons have. And the Knicks switched and they provided heavy gap help with Mikal Bridges and with OG Anunoby. And the mismatches the Celtics wanted to hunt worked really well into the Knicks' favor because Brunson and Cat, I think, held up better on those two guys, on Brown and Tatum, better than anyone could have thought. And a lot of it was because like Mikal and OG are elite gap helpers. Detroit, in contrast, has much less shooting, but they have a much better passer in Cade. And obviously you can't help off Duncan Robinson. And we'll see, I think by and large, the Knicks will dare anyone other than Duncan and maybe like Kevin Huerter, if he's playing, though he hasn't shot great this year, on the Pistons to be like, hey, make threes. And if those shots go in for Detroit, you kind of like tip your cap and you say that's the series. If those shots don't go in for Detroit, I think the Knicks like will be able to like pull out some like real defensive battles with Detroit. But at the end of the day, like the hedge and recover crap that we saw Tom Thibodeau try against Indiana, and Indiana forces you to, like, one, I don't think Detroit puts as much pressure on you that way. Two, like I would much rather live with Brunson on Cade than Brunson trying to get back to Duncan Robinson while Robinson shoots open three after open three on him. Like I think that's going to be how they have to approach it.
Yeah, I thought that that last point that you were bringing up was what I was thinking of, because Cade spent a lot of time this offseason looking at the film, seeing that he had a lot of hedge gap threes open. Yeah. He missed a lot of them against the Knicks. So he really put a lot of effort into working on that. His pull-up three-point shooting is much better this year, which is why I don't think the Knicks might not go with the whole show Brunson and have him recover to a flaring Duncan Robinson. They might just switch outright. So that's why I was wondering.
Yeah, and Brunson also, like, at 6'2", like, Duncan doesn't see him. Like, that is an open shot in the gym for one of the best shooters on earth. So hopefully that doesn't happen, Koo. And I'm hoping we get, you know what, even for Pistons fans, you guys are competitive. You want a close game 3. Come on. Hopefully it's not another blowout.
Duren and Stu are back. So
please leave some mean comments. It is money in my pocket. Knicks fans, I encourage you to do the same for Koo. If the Knicks pull this off, go leave some mean comments on his page. But until then, he's Khahil. Check him out over at Locked On Pistons. I'm Gavin Shaw. Check me out on Locked On Knicks for the Pistons fans tuning in. We'll talk to you soon on both of our pods.